Podcast. Another week of podcasting, of talking, of conversing.
Chatting.
We've made it. Chatting.
Communicating.
How many words can we come up with for talking? Discussing.
Speaking to one another.
Yeah, well, that was multiple words. That's where it fell apart, which is good because whoever's listening to this right now is going, I don't really want to listen to 10 minutes of them trying to figure out words for talking. So
I could try.
Yeah, I mean, we could try. But so welcome to the High Tech Podcast, where we talk about deep topics like how can you talk about talking? So you're joining. I'm Josh. Welcome, and joined by the wonderful Will Illingworth over here.
Wonderful Will.
Just as deep as I do about talking. This is gonna be a thing now. I'm gonna run with it. High Tech Podcast. We're talking about a lot of fun things this week. But Will, why don't you let them know let's start the actual conversations.
The actual conversation, the actual discussion.
Yeah, let's get to the actual discussion.
Talk.
Let's not beat around the bush this time. Let's just
straight to it.
Let's just jump in. Nobody cares what we think about talking or about TV.
Are you done? So as we try to do, we've linked our conversation this week to the app we're going to get to and keep the kind of those ideas in mind. But one of those big ticket items in education is assessment. I mean, it's a cash cow, right? You got so many things in assessment trying to handle browsers, lockdown browsers, proctoring, all that. But then just quizzes, right? Quiz tools, quizzes, Kahoot. You can't your learning management system, whatever it is, got a quiz tool. That's kind of already thinking digital. Like before all that, paper. I remember taking blue book assessments and scantrons, right? Those assessments, of course, the goal is just to learn what the students have learned. We want to know where they are, what might they need some backfill on, how well are they doing, are they going to pass the class, right? Some basics on assessment. But traditionally, we separate assessment up into two categories. There's formative assessment and there's summative assessment. Formative assessment, the goal there is to just monitor the student's learning experience and keep in touch with where they are. The idea, hopefully, of formative assessment, if you're using it consistently, effectively, is that your students shouldn't be failing with a surprise. Like nobody should be surprised by a failing grade if you're maybe staying in touch with some formative assessment. Summative assessment, on the other side, though, that's where you get your big grades. That's your midterm exam, your final exam. That's your weekly quizzes, your reading journals, your discussions, your projects, right? Those summative assessments have kind of a higher weight to them. They are specifically meant to evaluate where the students are at that point. So formative is to monitor, to keep track as we go, hopefully helping us find those things that they're weaker on sooner and support those, before they get to a summative exam. And then those summative ones are to really kind of do that full checkpoint, like, hey, we're a quarter of the way in this semester. What do you know so far? So the formative and summative assessments, kind of just having those on the board, really helpful to kind of set the mind for a lot of the ed tech we look at, right? Mm-hmm. Some ed tech is like almost exclusively formative assessment. The one we're going to look at today does not have any graded element in it. You would have to grade it separately, right? So the one we're going to look at later is really primarily a formative tool. Formative, though, is not bound to just tools. I bet you can think of a few, Josh, but when a faculty member even just asks for you to raise your hand, that's formative assessment.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you have, I've actually worked with some faculty before who are struggling to know if their students are paying attention or if they're gathering things, and where he would ask every time, do you guys get it? Do you guys understand? Is this making sense? Those kind of very blanket questions, you just get crickets. And so I was like, well, what if we come up with a system, something that tells the students this is how to communicate, right? And so while we never implemented it, the whole idea was just something as simple as like red and green cards, right? He asks a question, are we good? You raise a green card, he moves on. You raise a red card, he stops and he asks you what's going on, or like that kind of thing. Can really get that initial formative assessment stuff. And summative, I mean, we all know what those can be. We've all written papers, we've all taken exams.
What? No, I've never done that in my entire academic career.
How did you get a master's degree?
Yeah, it's not a real one. No, I'm just joking.
How much did it cost you?
Let's not talk about that.
Find it from a gumball machine?
Yeah, no, of course I've written papers. Yeah, no, I mean, like, I think it's important to talk about. I think why you originally brought this topic up, right? Is like it is important to remember these, especially those two specifically. I know we have a little bit in here about like experiential stuff, which is like I think of as like the new like cool brother of the summative and formative. It's like ooh, I got experiential in there too. But like I think it's just important to talk about this because we talk about, especially where I'm noticing the importance is just like we have a lot of these conversations when it comes to like teaching in class and working on it, but now we see a lot of people go like hybrid and digital and remote and even fully online. And I feel like when we go those directions, sometimes unless it's carefully thought through, the way that these two ideas work together are forgotten. And it's easy just to be like, well, here's your content for this week. Here's your reading. Here's the like 4 videos I recorded for you with my face down in the corner. And okay, now you got a quiz and a paper due at the end of the week, or something along those lines.
Very simple.
Yeah, very simple. And it's like that structure sometimes forgets how formative and summative can go together. And you get a lot more like summative happening in the LMS. But I think like formative is also a thing that could be easily done in there. Like to your point, like it's even like your comment, I think you made like reading response or journal response. I think some of that can be formative too, where it's like hey, prompts that can get the student thinking, like what wasn't clear in the reading this week, or what was like a point that stood out to you, things like that, that can get students talking. So you can start to get like, it's a low stakes type of assignment that can be done digitally. But you just need to provide a lot of feedback as the instructor, like engage with them. We do this most often in areas of like discussion posts. Like you could see that happen in a discussion post because then students can interact with each other then. But it doesn't just have to be that. I mean, if you're doing through Zoom or things like that, there's a ton of tools that you could use as well to like just prompt out a question and get student feedback at the same time and use that in that moment as a teaching tool. But I think like formative, it's so important, especially in the digital space and virtual space, to like intentionally slow down and make sure the student's understanding things. Because it can be really easy, I think, for a student to like read and look at a whole bunch of content, and even sit in a Zoom class or whatever, a conference, and think they're doing great, and then take a quiz at the end of the week, and all of a sudden now it's like clear that they have no idea what they're doing. And that's why I think like it's so important to fit these things together, especially in a world where we've got digital and online components now as a part of teaching.
Well, and I also think, like you're saying, like the and now moment, I don't think formative had a front row seat, frankly, almost until COVID. And it's not even that formative, the language got to the front of the row, but like I've had so many faculty ask me, how do I know they're there? How do I get them engaged? How do I get them to turn on their webcams? Like those 3 questions actually get to formative assessment, because one of the first lines of defense in formative assessment for an instructor is seeing their student. Right. And there's so many of the instructors I've worked with who are just like bummed that they can't see students anymore. They can't see the body language. They can't see them raise their hand. They can't tell them to stop looking at the cell phone, right? They just can't see them anymore. And so they've lost that formative step. That alone was a formative assessment for instructors. And now Zoom is taking the place. Like, I know many faculty who have set this expectation, like, we will use the Zoom reactions. You will give me a yes. You will give me a no. You will give me a thumbs up. If you don't do that, that's participation. That's attendance. Like they put that into their kind of learning experience to say, no, if you don't give me 10 thumbs up, you don't get 10 points for the week. It's not that road of a system. That's a summative system, right? But in a formative sense, like if you're not responding with reactions when I call them out, I'm going to assume you're not there. And that is, again, feedback for the instructor to say, hey, I'm teaching something and you're not getting it. You're not hearing it at all if I don't know that you're there on the Zoom line.
Yeah. One of the like cool, I think like we're not getting into a ton of different tool concepts here. We'll talk about this one maybe farther down the road in the podcast. But one of the things I think that is interesting you can do in a digital space that I was just thinking fits well into like a formative idea is Like there's tools out there that give us the ability to implant questions inside video and in content. And like there's another good example of a way that you could do a formative, like low stakes, like, hey, you're listening to this lecture, you're listening to something I've given, but I'm going to drop in some questions into the video and ask you to write some questions out. And then you get some responses back from your students to see, did what you say make sense? And if you guys are in an institution where you don't have a tool that can do that, where you drop questions in, it'd also be really easy to like insert your videos into like a digital quiz and have like open-ended questions that they respond to.
Oh yeah, the easiest way to do that is just like you said. Like some folks really look to those tools and like, oh great, it's going to pause the video and stop the student and make them answer the question before they can move on. That's great and all, but like you could literally just give them the YouTube video at the top of the quiz, and question 1 is, at 30 seconds, I said, hey, blah, blah, blah. What do you think? And then next question. At 45 seconds, I also say, what do you, like, they're going to have to at least scrub to 30 seconds, at least scrub to 45 seconds to hear what you said to answer the question.
Yeah, that's true.
So they might not listen to the thing front start to finish, but if you put timestamps, like I say this, what do you think? They have to go listen to that timestamp to be able to respond. That's, you just broke down an industry, man.
Well, yeah. I mean, now our institution has a tool that does that. So we use a video tool called Canvas Studio with Canvas because we use that as an LMS. So that works great. But I think like the point of that is what I find ironic out of your statement is that like people are bringing it more to the attention because they can't see their students anymore. But the reality is, like in a face-to-face class, if we're not talking just the digital tools, we do have to be careful, I think, with this formative, that like just reactions from students doesn't mean you know what they think. Or that they understand what you're saying. And that's why I think it's important to like, even like we talk about in a video, right? You add questions. Like to me, formative isn't just like, yes, there's some intentional cool ways that people have come up with it, like exit tickets or like entrance and exit tickets, which is basically if students come in and answer a few questions in the beginning and then, let you know at the end how things are going. And there's a bunch of ways that type of activity takes on, or they do, surveys in class or, whatever it means. But I think it can also just be like the simple of like, hey, I'm going to stop talking or stop this, activity we're doing. And we're going to like group up and you're going to maybe answer a question or two or talk about what we just talked about, like this practice of evaluating what you've been learning.
Yeah.
I think it's just important. And I think it's coming to the forefront because people can't see students anymore. But the reality is they weren't knowing if students were doing well or not, either just by seeing them. Student can look super engaged. I was really great at that as a student, of looking like I was engaged. And I always wasn't, or wasn't always engaged. Like I was like, man, I can't, especially those classes. Like, I'm sorry, whoever my professor was, but if your class was like right before lunch, there was a certain point that like I looked like I was engaged, but I was thinking about roast beef, like I wasn't thinking about what you were saying.
Yep.
So it's important to do that type of stuff. You need to like force students out to do that type of thing. And I think digitally and physically, there's ways to do it. And then when that's combined with then, we don't only want to do formative low stakes stuff. When it's actually combined then with a, project or a paper or a test or exam, or you're hopefully getting a better idea along the way of how your students are understanding things, and they're getting a better understanding of what you're looking for. You don't want to, I always was frustrated with the teachers I had who did this, which was basically like they actively went out of their way to hide what they were looking for before a test. It's like, what's the point? You want them to learn.
Right.
This isn't a searching game.
Right.
This isn't
and on the other side, if your assessments are searching games and you don't want to just give the students the answers, like maybe there's something else to look at. If you can Google your assessment, is it really assessing something?
Yeah. Well, you don't want to make your summative assessments like easy. You don't want to be those guys who throw out the quiz questions or things. It's like what should you do if someone's choking? Help them or let them die. Like there's a clear right answer. Like you don't want to be that, but at the same time, like you want to be helping your student actually learn the content. The whole point of the summative assessment is that they know what they've been learning, and you're putting it to the test, or you're having them apply it, or you're having them go deeper, or you're having a huge paper that they're, synthesizing and working through the content that you've been doing.
And I think, Josh, that actually points us to something we were kind of considering in the research behind this episode, is like, how do those then begin to fit together, this formative and summative approach? And I think that there's something to be said for, like, literally, if you've never used formative assessments before, and no formative experience, if you don't understand this, or it's tough for you, my first encouragement is take all of your summative experiences and make smaller versions without points or with very little points. Like if you're a quizzer or an examiner and that's all you've done, make smaller quizzes that the students can take all the time and take them over and over and over again for 0 points. That is formative assessment that fits with your existing assessment practice. If you're going to have them do a big final project where they write a paper, create a blog, make a website, and something else, right? Give them smaller experiences of that throughout the semester with little or no points involved, so that they can build the skills they need to perform that project at the end of the semester for all the points. It's this idea of give them a couple inches throughout the semester so that when it comes time for that big assessment, they'll be able to do it. I think that that's an easy way to integrate informative assessments into an existing curriculum. You don't have to try anything new. You don't have to try anything different. Just take what you're already doing and make them lower stakes samples.
In other words, what you're saying, Will, is I wish there was a term for this. Like scaffolding, be a great term. We should
wait. Don't tell them the secret. If you tell them the secret, we won't have jobs.
We should take this to someone. We should patent that or write books about it. Or have like cool little images of scaffolds next to what we're doing. Crazy. No, like obviously we're joking. Like if you're in education, you probably have heard the word scaffolding before, but I think that's the way these two things fit together well are exactly what you said. Like it's thinking through how you build up to the summative assessment. And I have a lot of, I hear instructors throw around the words of like, this is, hand holding for my students, especially in our area in higher ed, right? The student should be above this by now. And it's like, no, that's not how this works. Like, this is how people learn.
And the honest response at the some side is like, the student should be able, your student isn't. That's it. That's a fact. That's why you think they should be, but they're not.
That's why they're in your class. Right. That's why they're there. Like they need to learn. There are plenty of examples of the fact of like the best teachers I've had have been the ones who've done that, right? Your job is not to just bestow glorious information on them and the student receive it and then just like communicate it back to you in beautiful summative assessments. If they didn't take good enough notes or listen to you. Your job is to actually guide them along the process of it. And yes, that involves teaching, it involves sharing content, but it also involves being there to assess how they're doing along the way, to make sure that they're coming along with you, right? And that's not hand-holding. That in my mind is good teaching. That's bringing them along the way in the space. And that's why I think these two things fit so well together.
I think I want to capture two thoughts on that. We should probably start moving on, but what you're pointing to, Josh, is the idea, there's a theory called tabula rasa, and it means blank slate. It's actually an educational psychology theory. It's a psychology theory as well, that like it's almost assuming that the people coming to you are a blank slate, that they have nothing in them, and they don't know any content knowledge, they don't have any skills knowledge. So when you receive this person, you're going to impart the glorious knowledge to them, and they shall become a written slate, right? I don't think that's ever true. I mean, maybe a baby firstborn has tabula rasa, right? But even there's nurturing and environment that starts to impact that immediately the second they're born. So we know in communications, right, in speech classes and everything across the board, that like the message you're communicating, there's a responsibility shared between me and them. And so if they're not tabula rasa, if they're not blank slate, then we have to know that that audience has something, whether it's pre-existing knowledge about our subject, or they're hungry that day or tired, right? Whatever it is that's going on in them is a part of our experience with them. We can't get rid of that background. We have to accept that they are human. That's going to be a part of the experience, and we'll work them through that. And that's where the formative is so important, because sometimes that background stuff is anxiety over tests,
Yeah.
is depression because a family member is ill right now. And so when we hit them with like a midterm that's worth 40% of the grade, a final that's worth 40% of the grade, and 10% for participation, that's, it's easy for folks who are not maybe fully emotionally or physically present in their learning process for whatever reason to fail that course, even though maybe with the perfect environment, they have the mental capacity to pass the course, right? So that's where I think some of this formative and summative stuff becomes kind of a socio educational thing. Like we got to be aware of our students and aware of our audience to help them kind of come through the process and get through it healthily.
Yeah, well, and I also think it's like, yeah, we need to get moving on to our next topic, but I think it's also the reality of like, because as this comes off, we were joking a little bit, right, guys, before the podcast that like, obviously Will's degrees are more involved in education. And so, and me being in education with not a degree specifically from education, I have to experience this all the time where it's like, oh, there's a theory for the thing I'm saying. That's cool. But to the point, I also think it's just like a human thing, right? Like there is, I too often see in teachers and communicators and a lot of things where we assume what we are saying is clear, and if they don't understand us, it's their problem. And that's not reality. Like look around the world, okay? And tell me that that's how the world works, because that's
I don't know
not
if you've
how
ever
it
been
works.
to my family Thanksgiving dinner table, but
like we all can misinterpret each other very easily. I think a lot of our arguments in the world, getting out and beyond ed tech, right, can be traced back to we don't want to understand the motivations of the other person around or across the table. But the whole point of this being in the communication piece and the teaching is that it's not always that your student doesn't care. Sometimes it's that your student just genuinely doesn't understand what you're saying. And so I think why the formative needs to be a part of this is just that is your effort as a teacher to make sure that what you are saying is clear to the student and that they're understanding it. At least that's, in my opinion, when I look at it, coming in from not an education background, but from more of a kind of communicating background. That to me is where that really grabbed me. So like that's the job of trying to make sure that what you're saying, your student is learning it and understanding what you're saying or what you're teaching and processing it, and also getting them to process what you're saying at a deeper level.
All this formative and summative stuff, great information. It frankly can leave me with a lot of questions, and when you have questions, it's really good to find an answer. Much like
there it is.
Our app of the day, AnswerGarden.ch.
Transition. Nailed the transition. You've been looking for a way to get us over because Will's watching time. He knows
stuck the landing.
We're pushing over it.
I'm doing my gymnast bow right now.
Yeah, that was beautiful. That was a solid transition. I'm glad I ruined it by bringing it to attention. That was a solid transition.
No, we're all about the fourth wall here. Okay. I love it. So AnswerGarden is a wonderful formative assessment tool because, like I said before at the beginning of class, well, welcome everyone to our lecture today. This is class time, and if you'll take your seat in the back, it does not have any grading features. It does not give points. AnswerGarden is actually also really great for like presentations. It's great for, you can use it for trivia with family and friends if you want. AnswerGarden is very simple. You log in. Actually, you don't even need to log in, but you can if you want to save yours. You go to their site, answergarden.ch, C as in Charlie, H as in hotel, and you put in your topic. What is the meaning to life? What is your favorite fruit? What is, you write your question. You want to make sure that it's more generic so that you can get kind of a one or small phrase-based answer. And then you can put that question up. You can link the students to it. You can embed it in your PowerPoints and stuff. There's lots of ways to get fun with it. But when your students begin to answer the question, it auto-generates a word cloud. So instead of you preparing a word cloud and bringing that to the students, or instead of you sourcing all their information and then trying to copy and paste it over to a word cloud generator, AnswerGarden makes it on the spot. And so as one student, let's go back to the fruit example. I'll be able to answer this one, unlike the apple example from a couple episodes ago. With fruit, you might say, what's your favorite fruit? And so the answer comes up apple. That's the first one on the page, and it gets pretty big. It's the first and only response. But someone immediately says banana, orange, tangerine, kiwi, lemon, lime, right? You start seeing all these fruits come up, and the ones that are said more often get bigger, right? That's a word cloud idea. And the ones that are said less often get smaller. And by the end of this example, if you got 30 students, 50 students, 100 students, you've got a pretty cool, word cloud example. Well, one off, that's just formative. How are you feeling today? That's a great way to open class. Here's an AnswerGarden. How are you feeling today? Students say good, bad, indifferent, depressed, anxious, excited, happy, helpful. And so you've got just a kind of a word cloud spattering of how your students are feeling. Then you get into class, you start your lecture, and you throw up another AnswerGarden. What are you feeling so far about the topic for the day? And you get those kind of responses back in. And by the end of the class, you might ask again, how are you feeling after we've gone through class? The students might be able to give you that. This is how you would use formative. It's something that shouldn't take too long. You just need to have that link up and available to students. It can be Canvas, it can be your PowerPoint, however you Zoom, you can just drop it in Zoom chats. But you get that immediate feedback, and it's just low stakes. There's no requirements on the student's behalf, and it's just easy. Like some of the apps we get to talk about take us a long time to get into them in detail because of how many features or competitors. Like I don't know anything like AnswerGarden besides you going and making the word cloud yourself.
Yeah. This is the first. So for context, guys, like this is not a tool that I really had any experience with before we decided to do the podcast. Will was just like, hey, heard of AnswerGarden? And he threw in like a link, and I was like, that doesn't look like a real thing. But I clicked on it, right? And I think it's really cool. Like it's an easy tool. It's like you said, like I just went in real quick. I threw in a question and hit create, and it gave me a link with a page. And I started typing in answers because I don't have students at the moment that I was doing it. And so I was like, I'm my student. So I just typed in a whole bunch of answers. And you're right. Like the more people respond towards certain things, it highlights that word or phrase bigger in a word cloud, which I think is just, I think it's a great tool for like you're talking about, Will, just like easy kind of question. You want response, you want to get a feel for how your students are feeling, even like if you're trying to get them to think through, I think like a topic or something you worked through, like asking them not how you're feeling, but actually a question about the content that you've been working on, like, and having like single word answers, response back. I did see you can type in phrases and stuff. It gets a little bit more confusing when you're doing phrases with a word cloud. Word clouds weren't really meant for whole sentences. At least in this,
because everybody would have to write the same phrase.
They have to write the whole the same paraphrase. But like I think it could be a really cool tool to do that with, just like a really easy kind of drop in to get students' responses and get like a feel for who's answering more things. So like for instance, if you're answering, asking a question, who felt there was something confusing today in class that we were talking about, right? Or were you confused? Because if you asked who, they'd have to write their name. That was a stupid question. So let's
suddenly the word cloud just says all of their different names.
All of their names.
They're all the same size.
They're all the same size. No. So were you confused about something today, or are you good? Or something like that. And they could easily type in confused or good. You're gonna get a cool kind of response where, like, if most of the class is confused, you're gonna see a lot of confused is gonna be bigger. Right. Now that's like a very simplistic way to handle it. I think like there's some cool other ways you could deal with that.
Well, even as you're talking, like one came to mind, I could see it almost being like a pseudo scavenger hunt. So maybe you leave the AnswerGarden open for the entire class. And the question is, what theories or what theorists, what historical figures, maybe you're going to talk about 20 years worth of subject material in this class today. You have the students track as you go. Who do I mention? So as you say Teddy Roosevelt, they should be writing in Teddy Roosevelt's name. As you mentioned William Taft, they throw in William Taft's name. As you mentioned Abraham Lincoln, so that by the end of class, you almost have this word cloud of all the people you talked about throughout the whole session. Idea. And it's also like who was listening. So in theory, how you would do that activity is everyone should be doing it. So you have 25 students in class, and you're going to talk about 15 people. By the end of the word cloud, you should see 15 names with 25 submissions.
Yeah.
But if you see 14 names, that means everybody missed one or you didn't get to it. Or if you see, all 15 names, but each name is only in there 20 or 22 times, well, that means three to five people were not paying attention or missed a couple of them, right? So that could be a really cool way to be like, hey, I'm going to talk about a bunch of things today. And I'm actually thinking of some faculty where I've been in maybe their first day of class or the second day of class where it's like, hey, our class is built on these theorists. You need to know this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy, right? And so they'll just hammer that for the whole class. That'd be a cool activity. Stay in the answer garden, stay on top of it, track it. You'll know, again, for formative sake, you're not trying to track down the 3 people that didn't do it. It's not about that. It's about the 22 people that did do it and giving them practice and getting a sense for how many folks are staying with you.
Yeah.
Because if it was 25 students and only 12 were doing the work, you have a big question there. What are 13 of your students doing while you're talking?
Yeah.
Right. That's to raise
That's
that point
true.
earlier about those assumptions we're talking about. Like, we need to not assume that they're paying attention or that they're there. We have to, I hate to say it, we have to make them be there. We have to make them interact.
Yeah, I like, and just like another idea, just toss around ideas of how this could work. Another, while you were talking, I think another idea that could be really cool is, let's say we do it this way, right? You're talking about a lot of different topics. I don't, certain type of philosophy, or you're talking about certain part in history, right? Or certain theology, or whatever it may be, right? And you end the class with a little bit of time, give an answer garden, say what topic that we covered confused you the most, just a single topic word, right? Because let's just say you're covering a lot of different things, but let's say you're covering a couple of different kinds of philosophy topics, right? Or you're covering different ways of writing, right? And so you've got some major themes that you're covering. Which themes confused you the most, or even the one theme that did. And how AnswerGarden could be really cool is that students start responding, right? You got 15 different students in this class. They all respond. If you see a word cloud that's pretty even, okay, well then everybody sort of has their own little thing they're confused about. So we maybe need to deal with it. But if you're writing and you're seeing something, giant word coming up about, I don't know, Descartes. You're talking about I'm on a philosophy kick right now. I don't know why.
There you go.
Or C.S. Lewis. You're talking about people who write, and your C.S. Lewis comes out, right? Whatever it may be, you see a giant couple topics pop up, then the majority of the class is confused about these 3 topics. Right. Which can drive further conversation at the end of class, or can even drive the next class period to say, okay, maybe I need to, pivot a little bit and focus in on this area next time, or ask questions next time about this area. How were you confused? What confused you? And dig a little bit deeper into that. But it could easily, immediately for you, get a visual, even a visual to the class to know, hey, also most of you are confused about these 2 things. You know what I mean?
You're not alone.
You're not alone. And we'll cover this more, as opposed to if you didn't have AnswerGarden and you just ask that question in class, you get a bunch of responses, maybe on paper, you take them, and there's ways to do this, right? You go back and you look at all of the answers. But AnswerGarden's like an immediate feedback thing, where you'd immediately see, as the students are putting in visually, what kind of information's coming in.
And there's 2 things that we've been skirting around here that I wish we would have got remembered sooner. But one of the things that I want to just say quickly is that if you've got these answer gardens, you've got that big, awesome word cloud at the end. Save it. You can export that as a picture and use that as a learning artifact. So you can bring it up in your PowerPoint at the next class. So like Josh is saying there, if you said, what are the biggest issues you had today? And you only had 2 things come up on the word cloud, well, that's your word cloud, and that's going into the next class's PowerPoint. But on the other side, something we've been assuming here, and I wish we would have gotten to it sooner, forgive us, is that what do you do? Once you've done this formative assessment, what do you do? And here is, we're just reflecting on one thing you should do. Take that information you're getting from the students. What are you confused about? These top 3 things? Okay. In the next class, address them. Or we're in the digital world today. Put up a quick 15-minute lecture video to supplement those 3 topics, or go find some scholarly journals, or somebody else who's written on it and provide those as resources to the students. The other side of it, this is, I think, always fun. you get some sort of theme out of the answer garden showing you that they're not as comfortable with a specific topic. Assign that topic as a project for them to go out and research. Let them fill in their gaps. If they're not comfortable with it, or if they don't understand it, that might be debilitating. It might be too much, right? If it's some complex concept about chemistry, for instance, they might not be ready to understand that. But if it's like, you keep mentioning this guy Descartes, I don't even know how to spell Descartes. What do I need? It's like, here's his name, and go hit the Wikipedia. That's all you need to do, right? But next class, be prepared to report back on what you've learned about Descartes.
Yeah, or even like taking it into like an online format or like a hybrid format type of situation. Like it'd be cool to throw this up because you, like Will and I said, right? Like you can put this up. You could also share the link. Like this can be a thing. You could set inside AnswerGarden how long the thing is active to people, and so you could post this somewhere, have students kind of give their feedback, and then follow up with like a lot of your learning management systems that you're using. Have some kind of like announcement feature or some type of feature where you can message the students, follow up like and even in the next week or the end of the week say, hey guys, I saw, seems like these 2-3 topics are really confusing everybody. Like here's some more information on it. Here's where in the reading this week they focus in on this, right? Like they focus in on this topic. We're reading about Descartes next week, so you'll get more information. I apologize. Descartes has now become our theme for AnswerGarden. But you could follow up that way. And I think like this is again, you're actively getting from your students where either confusion is, where they stand in the learning that has been going through, and then you're trying to help guide them towards answers or towards more information, or trying to course correct for the students, and whether that's in class, where you're ending the class and you're coming back to it next classroom, or you're in an online environment and that means you're following up with an announcement or you're following up with some type of communication, a short video pointing to the reading. It's amazing how much difference in an online environment, just an instructor saying, hey, page 300 to 350 this week talks about this topic that you guys are really struggling with, or go back and read this, or hey, here's this article that might let you guys dig deeper into this, or here's short 5-minute video that I made just real quick for you guys about the topics that we've been talking about this week that seem to be creating confusion.
Right.
And you can follow up too, because I think one of the limits of AnswerGarden too is you can't get too complicated. Like you're getting the topics from them, so you may want to follow up with, hey, I saw you guys are struggling with this. Here's some more information. Those you guys who put this in, what are you struggling with? Maybe the next class that's actually getting a little bit more specific, like what was confusing to you about Descartes? What weren't you sure? Maybe even group them up and have them discuss it a little bit at the beginning of class and come back. Or great idea, have them do this. Descartes comes up because I can't come up with any other themes today about the issue, and you end the class and say, okay, you seem a little confused about Descartes. Write down what that confusion was, hand it to me, or try to find an answer in the reading. Here's where Descartes talks about more. Try to find an answer in next class. We're going to come back together in the beginning, and I'm going to have you guys group up and share with what you discovered over the last week. Something like that that could be done. There's a lot of different ways I think you could leverage the information then to be a learning experience.
Yeah. So I think that altogether, it's good to have an understanding of these formative and summative concepts, but then keep the toolbox full. Keep another arrow in your quiver. AnswerGarden's a great one. It's free. It's easy to use. I've already known it to be up for, one of the things Josh and I always think about is like longevity. I've been using it since 2014 or 2015, right? So we've got a good couple of 6-7 years of use out of this tool. It's been free the entire time. So I don't think there's a concern about it going away tomorrow. And at worst case, if you lost AnswerGarden, you can go back to the word cloud idea. You can use a Google Doc. You can use email. You can use Canvas quizzes, whatever you got. You can kind of get the same information from the students. The big novelty of AnswerGarden is it allows you to moderate. It gives you some time frames. It keeps the responses short, and it generates the word cloud. That's the novelty of this specific tool.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely other, if you're nervous about trying this tool because this may go away, I think it's going to be here for hopefully a while. Like Will said, it's been around for a while. It's also, from what Will and I know about technology, it's not a complicated website to keep running. So I'm not sure they're even spending money on making sure that this thing stays running. They just have it there, and are keeping it up to date. But I think the the general feel, we'll see if that pops through in the recording.
It did.
It definitely did. Okay, cool. But the point is there's other alternatives to doing this, right? You could easily create Google Doc or a Word doc, Word doc that they type stuff into, and there's other word cloud generators that you could take what they give you and put it in there and get your word cloud. It's just, I think AnswerGarden does a good job of just simplifying it,
being nice and easy.
Yeah, being nice and easy.
All right, that's this week's conversation. We appreciate you listening with us. We are going to wrap up here in just a second as we close out this episode. Thank you for joining us again for another episode of High Tech Podcast. This has been Josh and Will, as always, bringing you tomfoolery and shenanigans. We hope you'll join with us next time for another episode as we look at how we can harness technology in the physical and digital classroom. We're always begging the question and hopefully providing you some answers. Thank you, and see you next time.
See ya.